Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Part 1, Book 1, Story 14. Two fellow monks. At Savatthi lived two young men of station who were inseparable friends. On a certain occasion, they went to the monastery, heard the teacher preach the law, renounced the pleasures of the world, yielded the breast to the religion of the Buddha, and became monks. When they had kept residence for 5 years with preceptors and teachers, they approached the teacher and asked about the duties in his religion. After listening to a detailed description of the duty of meditation and the duty of study, one of them said, "Reverend Sir, since I became a monk in old age, I shall not be able to fulfill the duty of study, but I can fulfill the duty of meditation." So he had the teacher instruct him in the duty of meditation as far as arahantship. And after striving and struggling, attained arahantship together with the supernatural faculties. But the others said, "I will fulfill the duty of study." Acquired by degrees the Dhamma, the word of the Buddha, and wherever he went, preached the Dhamma and intoned it. He went from place to place, reciting the Dhamma to 500 monks, and was preceptor of 18 large communities of monks. Now a company of monks, having obtained a formula of meditation from the teacher, went to the place of residence of the older monk, and by faithful observance of his admonitions, attained arahatship. Thereupon they paid obeisance to the elder and said, "We desire to see the teacher." Said the elder, "Go, brethren, greet in my name the teacher, and likewise greet the 80 chief elders, and greet my fellow elder, saying, 'Our teacher greets you.'" So those monks went to the monastery and greeted the teacher and the elders, saying, "Reverend Sir, our teacher greets you." When they greeted their teacher's fellow elder, and he replied, "Who is he?" Said the monks, "He is your fellow monk, Reverend Sir." Said the younger monk, "But what have you learned from him?" "Of the Digha Nikaya and the other Nikayas. Have you learned a single Nikaya? Of the 3 Pitakas, have you learned a single Pitaka?" And he thought to himself, "This monk does not know a single stanza containing 4 verses. As soon as he became a monk, he took rags from a dust heap, entered the forest and gathered a great many pupils about him. When he returns, it behoves me to ask him some questions. Now, somewhat later, the older monk came to see the teacher, and leaving his bowl and robe with his fellow elder, went and greeted the teacher and the 80 chief elders. Afterwards, returning to the place of residence of his fellow elder, the younger monk showed him the customary attentions, provided him with a seat of the same size as his own, and then sat down, thinking to himself, I will ask him a question. At that moment, the teacher thought to himself, should this monk annoy this my son? He is likely to be reborn in hell. So out of compassion for him, pretending to be going the rounds of the monastery, he went to the place where the 2 monks were sitting and sat down on the seat of the Buddha already prepared. For wherever the monks sit down, they first prepare the seat of the Buddha, and not until they have so done do they themselves sit down. Therefore the teacher sat down on a seat already prepared for him. And when he had sat down, he asked the monk who had taken upon himself the duty of study a question on the first jhana. When the younger monk had answered this question correctly, the teacher, beginning with the second jhana, asked him questions about the 8 attainments and about form and the formless world, all of which he answered correctly. Then the teacher asked him a question about the path of stream entry, and he was unable to answer it. Thereupon the teacher asked the monk who was an arahat, and the latter immediately gave the correct answer. Well done, monk, said the teacher, greatly pleased. The teacher then asked questions about the remaining parts in order. The monks who had taken upon himself the duty of study was unable to answer a single question, while the monk who had attained unto arahatship answered every question he asked. On each of 4 occasions, the teacher bestowed applause on him. Hearing this, all the deities, from the gods of earth to the gods of the world of Brahma, including Nagas and Garudas, shouted their applause. Hearing this applause, the pupils and fellow residents of the younger monk were offended at the teacher and said, why did the teacher do this? He bestowed applause on each of 4 occasions on the old monk, who knows nothing at all, but to our own teacher, who knows all the sacred word by heart, and is at the head of 500 monks, he gave no praise at all. The teacher asked them, "Monks, what is it you are talking about?" When they told him, he said, "Monks, your own teacher is in my religion, like a man who tends cows for hire. But my son is like a master who enjoys the 5 products of the cow at his own good pleasure." So saying, he pronounced the following stanzas. Though much he recites the sacred words, if that heedless man acts not accordingly, he is like a cowherd counting the cows of others, and has no part in the fruits of the religious life. Though little he recites the sacred words, if a man acts in accordance with the teaching, if he forsake lust, hatred and delusion, if he have right knowledge, and his mind is truly free, if he cling to naught in this world or hereafter, such a man has a share in the fruits of the religious life. Part 1, Book 2, Story 1, Part 2, Treasurer Ghosaka. Story of the past. Halaka casts away his son. Once upon a time, there was a famine in the kingdom of Ajita, and a man named Halaka, unable to get a living, took his young son Kapi and his wife Kali, and thinking, "I will go to Kosambi and get a living there," set out with provisions for the journey. As they proceeded on their journey, their provisions gave out, and finally they were so overcome with hunger that they were not able to carry the boy. Thereupon the husband said to his wife, "Wife, if we live, we shall have another son. Let us cast this child away and continue our journey alone." There is a proverb, "A mother's heart is tender," and so it was with this woman. She replied, "I could never cast away a living child." "Well, what shall we do?" "Carry him by turns." When the mother's turn came, she would lift the child like a wreath of flowers, clasp him to her breast, or carry him on her hip, finally giving him back to his father. When the father took the child, no matter where he held him, he suffered more intense pain than ever from hunger. Again and again he said to his wife, "Wife, if we live, we shall have another son. Let us cast this child away. But this the mother steadfastly refused to do. Finally, the child became so tired from being passed back and forth that he fell asleep in the arms of his father. When the father observed that he was asleep, allowing the mother to precede him, he went and laid the child on a couch of leaves under a bush, immediately resuming his journey. The mother turned, looked back, and not seeing the child asked, "Husband, where is my son?" "I laid him down under a certain bush." "Husband, do not kill me. Without my son, I cannot live. Bring my son back to me." And she smote upon her breast and wept. So the husband retraced his steps, recovered the child, and brought him back to her. In consequence of having cast away his child on this occasion, Kutuhalaka was himself cast away 7 times in a later existence. Let no one regard an evil deed lightly, saying, "It is only a small matter." Continuing their journey, they came to the house of a certain herdsman. On that day, as it happened, one of the herdsman's cows had calved, and the herdsman was about to hold the customary festival in honor of the event. Now, a certain Pachekabuddha was accustomed to take his meals in the house of the herdsman. The herdsman, after providing the Pachekabuddha with food, celebrated the cow festival with an abundant supply of rice porridge. When the herdsman saw the visitors, he asked them, "Whence have you come?" They told him the whole story, whereupon the tender-hearted youth took pity on them and saw to it that they were given rice porridge with a plentiful supply of ghee. The wife said to the husband, "Husband, if only you can live, I can live. For a long time you have not had sufficient food. Now eat to your heart's content." So saying, she set the ghee and curds before him, eating only a little of the ghee herself. The husband ate heartily, but so intense was the hunger from which he had suffered during the preceding 7 or 8 days that he was unable to satisfy it. When the herdsman had seen to it that they were provided with rice porridge, he began himself to eat. Now, under the herdsman's stool lay a bitch he had raised, and as the herdsman sat there eating, he fed her with morsels of rice porridge. Kutuhalaka watched him feed her and thought to himself, "Fortunate indeed is that bitch to get such food to eat." Kutuhalaka was unable to digest the rice porridge he had eaten, died during the night, and received a new existence in the womb of that very bitch. His wife performed the funeral ceremonies over his body, and remaining in that very house worked for hire. Receiving a pint pot of rice, she cooked it and placed it in the bowl of the Pacheka Buddha, saying, "May these grains of rice bring a reward to your servant." And she thought to herself, "It would be well for me to remain right here. The Pacheka Buddha comes here regularly, and whether there be arms or not, I shall have the privilege of paying obeisance to him each day and of ministering to him. By so doing, I shall obtain peace of mind and earn much merit." And she remained right there, working for hire. After 6 or 7 months, the bitch gave birth to a single pup. The herdsman reserved the milk of one cow for the pup, and in no long time he grew to be a fine big dog. When the Pacheka Buddha ate his meal, he invariably gave him a portion of his rice, and because of this, the dog became deeply attached to the Pacheka Buddha. Now the herdsman was accustomed to go regularly twice each day to wait upon the Pacheka Buddha, and the dog always went with him. On the way was a lair of wild beasts, and the herdsman used to frighten the wild beasts away by striking bushes and ground with a stick and calling out 3 times, "Su! Su!" One day he said to the Pacheka Buddha, "Reverend Sir, in case at any time I should be unable to come, I will send this dog for you. Therefore, if I send him, please understand that I wish you to come." A few days later, the herdsman found it inconvenient to go in person. He therefore sent the dog in his place, saying, "Boy, go, bring his reverence back." At the mere word of the herdsman, the dog started off. Where he had seen his master stop and strike bushes and ground, the dog also stopped and barked 3 times. And when he was sure that his barking had frightened away the wild beasts, he went on. Early in the morning, having attended to nature's needs, he entered the hut of leaves and grass, went to the place where the Pacheka Buddha sat, barked 3 times by way of announcing his arrival, and then lay down at one side. By this, the Pacheka Buddha knew that it was time for him to go, and therefore started out. The dog ran before him, barking constantly. From time to time, the Pacheka Buddha tested the dog by taking the wrong path. But every time he did so, the dog, by standing across the path and barking, intimated to him to take the other path. One day the Pacheka Buddha took the wrong path, and when the dog tried to stop him, Without turning back, he pushed away the dog with his foot and went on. The dog, perceiving that he did not intend to turn back, took the hem of his undergarment in his teeth and dragged him along until he brought him to the right path. Such was the strength of the affection of the dog for the Pacheka Buddha. Later on, the Pacheka Buddha's robe wore out. When the herdsman provided him with materials for a new set of robes, the Pacheka Buddha said to him, "Brother, it is difficult for a person all alone to make a robe. I will go to a convenient place and have it made for me. Make it right here, Reverend Sir." "No, brother, I cannot." "Well then, Reverend Sir, do not take up your residence far from here." The dog stood listening to every word they said. The Pacheka Buddha said, "Wait a moment, brother." Thereupon, leaving the herdsman behind, he flew up into the air and departed in the direction of Gandhamadana. When the dog saw him flying through the air, he began to bark and howl, and he kept this up until the Pacheka Buddha gradually faded from view, whereupon his heart broke. Animals, they say, are straightforward and not given to deceit. Men, however, think one thing in their heart, but say another with their lips. Therefore said the exalted one to a monk, "The ways of men are past finding out, but the ways of the beasts are easy to discover." So when the dog died, he was reborn because of his straightforwardness and lack of deceit in the world of the 33, with the retinue of 1,000 celestial nymphs. And there he enjoyed glory and bliss unspeakable. When he but whispered, his voice carried a distance of 16 leagues. When he spoke in an ordinary tone, he could be heard all over the city of the gods, a city 10,000 leagues in extent. Do you ask, of what was this the consequence? It was because he barked and howled for love of the Pacheka Buddha. Remaining in the world of the 33 for no longer time, he passed from that state of existence. Deities pass from the world of the gods through 4 courses: exhaustion of life, exhaustion of merit, exhaustion of food, and anger. He that has earned much merit is reborn in the world of the gods, remains there during the term allotted to him, and is then reborn higher and higher. Thus, he passes through exhaustion of life. He that has earned a little merit soon exhausts that merit, just as 3 or 4 pint pots of rice tossed into a royal storehouse disappear, and he therefore soon dies. Thus he passes through exhaustion of merit, Still a third, while enjoying the pleasures of sense, fails through confusion of memory to partake of food, and the strength of his body being thereby impaired, he dies. Thus he passes through exhaustion of food. A fourth, jealous of the glory of another, becomes angry and dies. Thus he passes through anger. Story of the present. Ghosaka is cast away 7 times. Ghosaka, while enjoying the pleasures of sense, became forgetful, passed through exhaustion of food from the world of the 33, and was conceived in the womb of a courtesan of Kosambi. On the day when the courtesan gave birth to the child, she asked her slave woman, "What is it?" "A son, my lady." "Very well. Put this boy into an old winnowing basket and cast him away on the dust heap." Thus she caused him to be cast away. Courtesans will bestow care on a daughter, but not on a son. For it is through a daughter that their line of business is maintained. Crows and dogs surrounded the child and huddled about him. But in consequence of his barking and howling for love of the private Buddha, not one dared to approach him. At that moment, a man came out and saw the crows and dogs all huddled together. "What does this mean?" thought he to himself. Going nearer, when he saw the boy, he immediately took a fancy to him, and saying to him, "I have gained a son," he picked the boy up and took him home with him. Now the treasurer of Kosambi happened at that time to go to the royal palace. Seeing the house priest returning from the royal residence, he asked him, "Teacher, have you observed a conjunction of a constellation with one of the lunar mansions today?" "Yes, great treasurer." "What else have we to do? What will happen to the country?" "Only this. A boy has been born in this city today who will one day become the principal treasurer." As the treasurer's wife was at that time great with child, he immediately sent a messenger to his house saying, "Go, find out whether or not she has given birth to her child." He received the answer that she had not yet given birth to her child. Therefore, as soon as he had seen the king, he went home quickly, summoned a slave woman named Kali, gave her 1,000 pieces of money, and said, "Go, scour this city, find the boy that was born today, and bring him hither to me." While she was scouring the city, she came to the house where the child was, and asked the mistress of the house, "When was this child born?" "Today." "Give him to me," said she, first offering a penny, and gradually increasing the amount until finally, by offering 1,000 pieces of money, she obtained him. Then she took him with her and presented him to the treasurer. The treasurer gave him a home in his house, thinking to himself, if a daughter is born to me, I will marry her to this boy and make him treasurer. But if a son is born to me, I will kill him. After a few days, his wife gave birth to a son. Thereupon the treasurer thought to himself, if only this fondling did not exist, my own son would obtain the post of treasurer. I had best kill him immediately. So he said to Kali, carry this child to the cattle pen, and when it is time for the cattle to come out, lay him across the doorway, and the cattle will trample him to death. Observe whether or not they trample him to death, and then come back and tell me. She carried the child to the cattle pen, and as soon as the door was opened, laid him across the doorway. Now, at other times, the leader of the herd, the bull, came out last of all. But on this particular day, he came out first. In closed the boy with his 4 feet and stood stock still. Several hundred cows came out on either side of the bull, rubbing against his flanks as they passed. The herdsman thought to himself, hitherto this bull has always gone out last of all, but today he went out first and stood stock still in the doorway of the pen. What can this mean? Going near, he saw the boy lying under the bull. Immediately taking a fancy to him, he said to himself, I have gained a son. And picking him up, he carried him home. Kali went back to the treasurer, and in answer to his question told him what had happened. Said the treasurer, go to the herdsman, give him these 1,000 pieces of money, and bring the child back to me again. So she brought the child back again and gave him to the treasurer. Then he said to her, good Kali, 500 carts start from the city at dawn on a trading expedition. Take this child and lay him in the track of the wheels. Either the oxen will trample him under their feet, or the wheels will crush him to death. Observe what happens to him, and then return to me. She took the child and laid him down in the track of the wheels. The leader of the caravan came first. But when his oxen reached the place where the child lay, they threw off the yoke. Again and again the leader replaced the yoke and tried to drive the oxen forwards. But as often as he did so, they threw off the yoke and refused to move. He was still struggling with him when the sun rose. Why have the oxen acted thus? Thought he. He looked at the road and saw the boy. Oh, what a grievous wrong I have done, thought he. His heart was filled with joy at the thought. I have gained a son, and picking up the boy, he carried him off. Kali went back to the treasurer and in answer to his question told him what had happened. Said the treasurer, go to the caravan leader, give him 1,000 pieces of money and bring the child back to me again. When she had so done, he said to her, now carry him to the burning ground and lay him in the bushes. There he will either be eaten by dogs or attacked by demons, and he will die. As soon as you know whether or not he is dead, return to me. She took the child, laid him in the bushes and stood at one side. But neither dog, nor crow, nor demon dared to approach him. Pray, if he had neither mother, nor father, nor brother, nor other kinsman to protect him, what was it that did protect him? All that protected him was his howling for love of the private Buddha in his former existence as a dog. Just then a goatherd passed on one side of the burning ground, leading several thousand goats to pasture. A certain she-goat made her way into the bushes, eating leaves and grass, and seeing the boy, knelt down and gave him suck. The goatherd called, hey, hey! But she did not come out. Thereupon he said to himself, I will beat her with my stick and bring him out. So saying, he made his way into the bushes. And there he saw the she-goat on her knees, giving suck to the boy. He immediately took a fancy to the boy, and saying to himself, I have gained a son, picked him up and carried him off. Kali went back to the treasurer and in answer to his question told him what had happened. Said the treasurer, go to the goatherd, give him 1,000 pieces of money and bring the child back to me again. When she had so done, he said to her, good Kali, take this child with you, climb the mountain that is known as Robber's Cliff, and throw him down the precipice. He will strike against the sides of the ravine and be dashed to pieces when he reaches the bottom. As soon as you know whether or not he is dead, return to me. She carried the child to Robber's Cliff, and standing at the top of the mountain, threw him down. Now there grew along the mountain near that abyss a dense bamboo thicket, and the top of the mountain was covered with a thick growth of gunja shrub. As the boy fell, he dropped into this bamboo thicket as into a coverlet of goat's hair. Now that very day, the leader of the reed makers had received a gift of bamboo, and accompanied by his son, he had gone to chop the thicket down. As he began his work, the bamboo shook, and the boy cried out, that sounds like the voice of a boy. thought he. Climbing up on one side, he saw the boy. His heart was filled with joy at the thought, I have gained a son. And picking up the boy, he carried him off. Kali went back to the treasurer and in answer to his question told him what had happened. Said the treasurer, go to the reed maker, give him 1,000 pieces of money and bring the child back to me again. She did so, but in spite of the treasurer's attempts on his life, the child lived and thrived and grew to manhood. Ghosaka was his name. He was like a thorn in the eye of the treasurer, who could not look him straight in the face. Thinking of a way to kill him, the treasurer went to a friend of his who was a potter and asked him, when are you going to fire your bakehouse? Tomorrow. Well then, take these 1,000 pieces of money and do a job for me. What is it, master? I have a single base-born son. I will send him to you. Take him into an inner room, chop him to pieces with a sharp axe, throw him into a chatty, and bake him in the bakehouse. Here are 1,000 pieces of money to seal the bargain, as it were. But in addition, I will reward you suitably later. Very well, said the potter, consenting to the bargain. On the following day, the treasurer summoned Ghosaka and sent him to the potter, saying, yesterday I left an order with the potter to do a certain piece of work for me. Go say to him, finish the job my father gave you yesterday. Very well, said Ghosaka, and set out. As Ghosaka was on his way to the potter's, the treasurer's other son was playing marbles with some boys, saw him, and calling to him he asked, where are you going? I'm carrying a message to the potter for father. Let me go there. These boys have won a big stake for me. You win it back and give it to me. I'm afraid of father. Do not fear, brother. I will carry that message. I have lost a big stake. You play until I return again and win the stake back for me. We are told that Ghosaka was skillful at shooting marbles, and that for this reason his foster brother was so insistent. So Ghosaka consented to let his foster brother go in his place, saying, well then, go to the potter and say to him, finish the job my father gave you yesterday. Thus it happened that the treasurer's own son carried the message to the potter. The potter killed him according to the letter of the directions he had received from the treasurer and threw his body into the bakehouse. Ghosaka played marbles all day and went home in the evening. You have returned home, son? Queried the treasurer. Ghosaka then told him the reason why he had himself returned home and let his younger brother go to the potter. Woe is me! Cried the treasurer with a loud voice. He looked as though the blood had been drawn from his veins. He rushed to the potter, wringing his hands and wailing, "Oh, potter, do not kill me! Do not kill me!" The potter saw him approaching in this wise and said to him, "Master, make no noise. The job is done." Thus was the treasurer overwhelmed with sorrow, as with a mountain. Thus did he suffer great grief, even as do all who offend against those that are without offense. Such an one will right quickly come to one of 10 states. He will incur cruel suffering, or infirmity, or injury of the body, or severe sickness, or loss of mind, or punishment from the king, or a heavy accusation, or death of relatives, or loss of treasures, or else fire will consume his home. Upon the dissolution of the body, such a fool will go to hell. Now, under these circumstances, the treasurer was unable to look Ghosaka straight in the face. "How can I manage to kill him?" thought he. Finally he thought of a way. "I will send him to the superintendent of my 100 villages and order him to kill him," said he to himself. Accordingly, he wrote the following letter to the superintendent. "This is my base-born son. Kill him and throw him into the cesspool. Let this be done, and I shall know how to reward my uncle properly." Then he said to his foster son, "Dear Ghosaka, there is a superintendent over our 100 villages. Take this letter and give it to him." So saying, he fastened the letter to the hem of his garment. Now, Ghosaka did not know how to read and write, for ever since he was a boy, the treasurer had striven, although without success, to kill him. Why therefore should he have taught him to read and write? As Ghosaka set out, with his own death warrant fastened to the hem of his garment, he said to his father, "Father, I have no provisions for the journey." "You have no need of provisions for the journey. On the way, in such and such a village, lives a friend of mine who is a treasurer. Obtain your breakfast at his house, and then continue your journey." "Very well," said Ghosaka, and bowing to his father, set out on his journey. When he arrived at the village, he inquired where the treasurer's house was, went there, and saw the treasurer's wife. "Whence have you come?" she inquired. "From the city," he replied. "Whose son are you?" "I am the son of your friend, the treasurer, my lady." "Then you are Ghosaka?" "Yes, my lady." She fell in love with him at first sight. Now the treasurer had a daughter about 15 or 16 years of age, and she was exceedingly beautiful and fair to look upon. In order to keep her safe and sound, her parents lodged her on the topmost floor of a 7-storied palace in an apartment of royal splendor, giving her a single slave girl to run errands. At that moment the treasurer's daughter sent the slave girl to a shop. The treasurer's wife, seeing her, asked, Where are you going? On an errand for your daughter, my lady. Just come here a moment. Never mind the errand. Spread a seat for my son. Bathe his feet, anoint them with oil, and then spread a couch for him. After you have done this, you may do your errand. The slave girl did as she was told. When she returned, the treasurer's daughter scolded her for her long absence. The slave girl replied, "Be not angry with me. The treasurer's son Ghosaka has arrived, and I had to do this and that for him, besides going on an errand for you before I returned." When the treasurer's daughter heard the name, treasurer's son Ghosaka, love suffused her body, cleaving her skin and penetrating the marrow of her bones. For she had been his wife in his former existence as Halaka, and had given a pint pot of rice to the Pacheka Buddha. And through this she had been reborn in the household of the treasurer. No wonder her old passion for him returned and overwhelmed her. Therefore said the Exalted One, through previous association or present advantage, love springs up like a lily in the water. The treasurer's daughter said to the slave girl, "Girl, where is he? He is lying asleep on the couch. Has he anything in his hand? There is a letter fastened to his garment. What can be in this letter?" she thought. So while Ghosaka was asleep, and her mother and father were otherwise engaged, she came down without attracting their attention, detached the letter from his garment, took it with her, went into her room, closed the door, opened the window, and through her knowledge of writing, read the letter. "Oh," she exclaimed, "the simpleton is going about with his own death warrant fastened to his garment. Had I not seen it, he would surely have been killed." So she tore up this letter and wrote another in the name of the treasurer as follows: "This is my son Ghosaka. Procure presents for him from my 100 villages. Prepare a festival in honor of his marriage with the daughter of this district treasurer. Build him a 2-storied house in the center of the village wherein he resides. Surround his house with a wall and with a guard of men, and so provide him with ample protection. Then send me a message saying, 'I have done thus and so, and I shall know how to reward my uncle properly.'" Having written the letter, she folded it up and fastened it to the hem of his garment. After sleeping all day, Ghosaka arose, ate his meal, and went on his way. Early on the morning of the following day, he arrived at that village and saw the superintendent performing his village duties. When the superintendent saw him, he asked him, "What is it, dear Ghosaka?" "My father has sent you a letter." "What is it about, dear Ghosaka?" Bring it to me. He took the letter and read it, and then said, with an exclamation of delight, "See, men, how my master loves me. He has sent me a message saying, prepare a festival in honor of my oldest son. Bring wood and other building materials immediately." Having thus given orders to the householders, he caused a house of the kind described in the letter to be erected in the center of the village, had presents brought from the 100 villages, conducted the daughter of the district treasurer thither, celebrated the marriage festival, and then sent word to the treasurer, saying, "I have done thus and so." When the, when the treasurer received the message, he said, "What I would do, that I do not. What I would not do, that I do." Disappointment over the failure of his latest plan, together with sorrow over the death of his own son, set him on fire within and produced diarrhea. The treasurer's daughter gave orders, saying, "Should anyone come here from the treasurer, tell me before you tell the treasurer's son." The treasurer said to himself, "At any rate, I will not make this rascally son of mine heir to my property." With this thought in mind, he said to a certain official, "Uncle, I wish to see my son. Send a servant and summon my son." "Very well," replied the official, and giving a certain man the letter, sent him away. When the treasurer's daughter heard that the servant had arrived and was standing at the door, she sent for him and asked him, "What is it, my man?" "The treasurer is sick and wishes to see his son, and has therefore sent for him, my lady." "My man, is he strong or weak?" "He is still strong, my lady, and able to take nourishment." Without letting the treasurer's son know, she ordered that the man should be given lodging and expenses, and said to him, "You may go when I send you. Remain here for the present." Again the treasurer addressed the official, "Uncle, did you not send a messenger to my son?" "I did, master, but the man who went has not returned." "Well then, try again and send another." So the official sent another man, and the treasurer's daughter treated him just as she had the first. The treasurer's condition grew worse. One chamber pot went in, and another came out. Again the treasurer asked the official, "Uncle, did you not send a messenger to my son?" "I did, master, but the man who went has not yet returned." "Well then, try again and send another." So the official sent another man. When the third messenger arrived, the treasurer's daughter asked him the news. "The treasurer is a very sick man, my lady. He refuses to eat and is confined to his bed. One chamber pot comes out and another goes in. Now it is time to go," thought the treasurer's daughter. So she said to the treasurer's son, "I learn that your father is sick. Wife, what say you? It may be only a slight ailment, husband. What is to be done now? Let us take presents from his 100 villages and go see him. Very well, said he, having caused presents to be brought. He started out, conveying the presents in a cart. Then she said to him, your father is very weak. If we take all these presents, we shall be delayed on the way. Send them back. Having sent all the presents back to their own house, she said to the treasurer's son, husband, please stand at your father's feet. I will stand beside his pillow. And as they entered the house, she gave orders to her own men, stand on guard, both in the front of the house and in the rear. And when they had entered, the treasurer's son took his stand at his father's feet, and his wife beside his pillow. At that moment the treasurer was lying on his back, and the official was rubbing his feet. The latter said to him, Master, your son has arrived. Where is he? He is here, standing at your feet. When the treasurer saw his son, he sent for the receiver of his revenues and asked him, how much wealth is there in my house? Master, of money alone there are 400 millions. As for objects for employment and enjoyment, such as villages and fields and men and animals and wagons and carriages, such and such is the total. It was the treasurer's intention to say, all of this wealth I do not give to my son Ghosaka. But instead of this he said, I do give. When the treasurer's daughter heard this, she thought to herself, however, if this man should speak again, he might say something very different. Accordingly, pretending to be overcome with grief, she dishevelled her hair, burst into tears and said, Dear father, do you really mean this? In spite of these words of yours, which we hear, we are indeed unfortunate. So saying, she fell on him, struck the middle of his breast with the crown of her head, and in order that he might not be able to speak again, rubbed the middle of his breast with the crown of her head, displaying at the same time signs of profound grief. At that very moment, the treasurer died. They went and informed the king, Udena, of his death. The king had the funeral ceremonies performed over his body and asked, Has he any son or daughter? Your Majesty, he has a son named Ghosaka, and, Your Majesty, he bestowed all his property on him before he died. Some time afterwards, the king sent for the treasurer's son. Now, that day it rained, and there were pools of water here and there in the palace court. The treasurer's son set out to see the king. The king opened his window and watched him as he approached, noticing that as he crossed the palace court, he leaped over the pools of water that stood in the court. When he reached the palace and paid obeisance to the king and stood before him, the king asked him, Your name is Ghosaka? Yes, Your Majesty. The king comforted him, saying, Do not grieve at the thought that your father is dead. I will give you alone your father's post as treasurer. Then he dismissed him, saying, Now, dear Ghosaka, you may go, and stood and watched him as he left the palace. Now, whereas Ghosaka leapt over the water in approaching the palace, he walked through it on his return. The king sent orders for him to return from where he was and asked him, Dear Ghosaka, is it a fact that whereas in coming to me you leaped over the water, on your return you walked through it? It is even so, your majesty. Then I was a boy and was fond of water. But now I have been promised a post of honor by your majesty. Therefore, I must now lay aside my former ways and deport myself with modesty and dignity. On hearing this, the king thought to himself, There is a wise man. I will give him the post immediately. Accordingly, he gave him the wealth formerly possessed by his father, and the post of treasurer, together with all the 100 villages. Then Ghosaka mounted his chariot and drove sunwise around the city. Every place he looked at quaked and trembled. The treasurer's daughter sat talking with the slave woman Kali. Mother Kali, said she, it was through me that your son obtained all this worldly glory. How is it that, my lady? Why, this youth came to our house with his own death warrant fastened to the hem of his garment. I tore up that letter and wrote another, ordering the celebration of a festival in honor of my marriage to him. In this way did I protect him all that time. My lady, this is all you know about it. But as a matter of fact, from the time your husband was a little boy, the treasurer constantly sought to kill him. And though his attempts were unsuccessful, a large sum of money was spent solely for the purpose of accomplishing his death. Kali, the treasurer, was indeed guilty of abominable crimes. Having performed this ceremonial circuit of the city, Ghosaka entered his house. Now, when his wife saw him, she thought to herself, It was through me that you obtained all this worldly glory, and laughed. The treasurer's son asked, Why do you laugh? For a certain reason. Tell me the reason. She refused to do so. He drew his sword and said, If you do not tell me, I will cut you in twain. Then she said, I laughed to think that it was through me that you obtained all this glory. If what I possess was handed over to me by my father, where do you come in? We are told that during all that time, Ghosaka knew nothing about the designs against his life, and that was why he refused to believe what she said. So she told him the whole story, saying, When your father sent you forth bearing your own death warrant, I did this and that and protected you. What you say is not true, replied Ghosaka. Refusing to believe her, I will ask Mother Kali. So he asked the slave woman, Kali, is what she says true? Yes, my lord. From the time you were a little boy, your father sought constantly to kill you, and though his attempts were unsuccessful, a large sum of money was spent for the purpose of accomplishing your death. On 7 occasions, you had a narrow escape from death. Now, coming from the village of which he was headman, you have obtained the post of treasurer, together with all the 100 villages. When Ghosaka heard this, he thought to himself, how great was my presumption! But since I have escaped from so terrible a death, I must no longer live the life of heedlessness. Henceforth, therefore, I will live the life of heedfulness. Accordingly, he established alms for the blind and the poor, and employing his friend, the householder, as steward of his alms, he dispensed 1,000 pieces of money daily. Book 2, Story 3, Culla, Lanthaka, Thera. We are told that the daughter of a rich merchant of Rajaga, upon reaching the age of maturity, was provided by her mother and father with quarters on the topmost floor of a 7-storied palace and guarded with excessive care. But in spite of this, maddened with the madness of youth and lusting for a man, she did the deed of kind with her own slave. Frightened to think that others also might find out about her misconduct, she said to him, it is out of the question for us to live here any longer. If my mother and father discover my misconduct, they will tear me limb from limb. Let us go live elsewhere. So taking a few necessary things they could carry in the hand, they left the house by the principal door. It matters little, said they, where we go, so long as we go and live where others will know nothing about us. So saying, the two set out together. They took up their residence in a certain place and lived together, with the result that the young wife conceived a child in her womb. When her unborn child reached maturity, she took counsel with her husband, saying, if I give birth to my child in a place far removed from kith and kin, it will bring suffering to both of us. There is but one place for us to go, and that is home to my parents. But her husband, fearing that if he himself went there, he would be killed, kept postponing the day of their departure, saying, we will go today, we will go tomorrow. The young wife thought to herself, this simpleton realizes the enormity of his offense, and therefore dares not to go. After all, a mother and a father are one's best friend. Let this fellow go or not. At any rate, I intend to go. So while her husband was out of the house, she put the household utensils away, and informing her next-door neighbors that she was going home to her parents, she started out on the road. When her husband returned to the house and failed to see her, he inquired of the neighbors where she had gone. Hearing that she had gone home to her parents, he set out after her as fast as he could and overtook her on the road. And right there she gave birth to her child. What is it, wife? Asked the husband. Husband, it is a son. What shall we do now? That for which we intend to go home to my parents has happened by the way. Why therefore should we go there? Let us return to our own home. Agreeing that this was the best plan, husband and wife returned to their own home. Since their son had been born by the way, they gave him the name Wayman. In no long time the young wife conceived a second child in her womb. All is to be related in detail, precisely as before. Since this child also was born by the way, they gave him the name Little Wayman, calling the oldest son Big Wayman. Taking their two sons, they returned to their own place of residence. While they were living there, Big Wayman heard other boys speak of their uncles and grandparents. So one day he asked his mother, Mother, other boys speak of their grandfather and grandmother. Haven't we any relatives? Yes, my son. You have no relatives living here, but you have a grandfather, a rich merchant, living in Rajagar, and we have many other relatives living there too. Why don't we go there, mother? The mother evaded telling her son why she did not go there. But the children repeated the question time and again. Finally she said to her husband, These children weary me excessively. Will my mother and father eat us alive when they see us? Come, why not let the children see the family of their grandparents? I should not dare meet them face to face, but I will escort you there. Very well. Some means must be found by which the children can see the family of their grandparents. So mother and father took the children and arriving at Rajagar in due course, took up their residence in the hall of a certain woman near the gate of the city. Then the mother of the children sent word to her mother and father that she and her children had arrived. When her parents received this message, they said to each other, These two have grievously offended against us, and it is out of the question for them to stand in our sight. Let these two take as much money as they did, and go and live in some pleasant place. However, let them send the children here. So the two took the money which was sent to them, and giving their children into the hands of the messengers who came, sent them to their grandparents. Thus it happened that the children were brought up in the home of their grandparents. Of the two children, little Wayman was still very young. Big Wayman, however, used to accompany his grandfather to hear the possessor of the 10 powers preach the Dhamma, and as the result of his frequent visits to the teacher, his heart inclined to retirement from the world. Accordingly, he said to his grandfather, If you would give me your permission, I should like to retire from the world. What say you, dear grandson? There is no one in the whole world whose retirement from the world would give me so much pleasure as your own. If you are able to do so, by all means retire from the world. Accordingly, the grandfather took big Wayman to the teacher, who said, "Householder, you have won a boy." "Yes, reverend sir, this is a grandson of mine, who desires to become a monk under you." The teacher bade a certain monk on his round for alms to receive the boy into the order. The elder assigned to him as a subject of meditation the first 5 of the constituent parts of the body, and then received him into the order. The youth learned by heart a considerable portion of the word of the Buddha, kept residence during the season of the rains, made his full profession, and by diligently applying himself to meditation, attained arahatship. As big Wayman passed his time in the enjoyment of the bliss of jnanic meditation, in the enjoyment of the bliss of the fruit of the path, he thought to himself, "Assuredly, it is in the power of little Wayman to experience this same bliss." Therefore he went to the treasurer, his grandfather, and said to him, "Great treasurer, if you will give your kind permission, I should like to receive little Wayman into the order." "By all means receive him into the order, reverend sir." We are told that the treasurer was profoundly attached to the religion of the Buddha, and that when asked, "Of which daughter of yours are these 2 children the sons?" he felt ashamed to say, "Of my daughter who ran away," and that for these 2 reasons he was only too glad to give them permission to retire from the world. So the elder big Wayman received his brother little Wayman into the order, and established him in the moral precepts. But little Wayman, once received into the order, proved a dullard. Indeed, in 4 months he was unable to learn by heart the single stanza. Even as the lotus, the red lotus of fragrant perfume, appears at early morn full blown, with fragrance unimpaired, behold the Buddha, resplendent as the blazing sun in the sky. It seems that in the dispensation of the supremely enlightened Kasyapa, he possessed great wisdom, but that after entering the religious life, he ridiculed and made fun of a certain monk who was a dullard, while the latter was trying to learn the sacred word, and that this monk, embarrassed by the ridicule to which he was subjected, was unable either to learn the passage by heart or even to repeat it. As the result of that act, little Wayman was reborn as a dullard, and every sentence he learned put the preceding sentence out of his mind. Indeed, 4 months passed while he was striving to learn this one stanza. Thereupon big Wayman said to his brother, "Little Wayman, it is not in your power to master this religion. In 4 months you have not been able to learn a single stanza. How can you ever hope to reach the goal of the religious life? Leave the monastery at once." So saying, he expelled his brother from the order. But little Wayman was sincerely attached to the religion of the Buddha, and the last thing in the world he wished to do was to leave the order and return to the life of a householder. Now at that time Jivaka, Komarabacha, taking an abundant supply of garlands and of various kinds of perfumes, went to his own mango grove, rendered honor to the teacher, listened to the Dhamma, and then rising from his seat, and paying obeisance to the teacher, approached big Wayman, who was steward of the order, and asked him, "Reverend sir, how many monks are living with the teacher?" 500. Tomorrow, Reverend sir, bring the 500 monks presided over by the Buddha and take a meal in our house. The lay disciple, little Wayman, is a dullard and has made no progress in the law. I accept the invitation for all except him. When little Wayman heard that, he thought to himself, the elder accepts an invitation for all these monks, but in accepting it deliberately leaves me out. Beyond a doubt, my brother's affection for me is gone. Of what profit to me any longer is this religion? I will return to the life of a householder and spend my days giving alms and doing other works of merit. So on the following day, very early in the morning, he set out with the intention of returning to the life of a householder. Very early in the morning also the teacher surveyed the world, and seeing this incident, preceded little Wayman to the gate and walked back and forth on the same road little Wayman had taken. As little Wayman came along, he saw the teacher, and approaching him, paid obeisance to him. Said the teacher, "But little Wayman, where are you going at this hour of the day?" Reverend sir, my brother has expelled me from the order, and therefore I intend to return to the world. Little Wayman, it was at my hands that you received admission to the order. Therefore, when your brother expelled you, why did you not come to me? Come now, what have you to do with the life of a householder? You shall remain with me. So saying, the teacher stroked him on the head with his hand, the palm of which was marked with the wheel, and taking him with him, went and seated him over against the perfumed chamber, and creating a perfectly clean cloth, he gave it to him, saying, "Little Wayman, remain right here, face towards the east, rub this cloth, and say as you do so, removal of impurity, removal of impurity." Just then, mealtime was announced, whereupon the teacher, accompanied by the congregation of monks, went to the house of Jivaka and sat down on the seat prepared for him. Little Wayman sat down facing the sun and rubbed the cloth, saying as he did so, "Removal of impurity, removal of impurity." As he rubbed the piece of cloth, it became soiled. Thereupon he thought, this piece of cloth was perfectly clean before, but through this body of mine, it has lost its original character and has become soiled. Impermanent indeed are all existing things, and grasping the thought of decay and death, he developed insight. The teacher, knowing that little Wayman's mind had attained insight, said, "Little Wayman, think not that only a piece of cloth has become soiled and dyed with impurity. Indeed, within you are lust, impurity, and other defilements. Remove them, and sending forth the luminous image of himself." The teacher, sitting before him, present in bodily form, as it were, pronounced the following stanza. Lust, not dirt, is properly called impurity. To lust is correctly applied the term impurity. Monks should rid themselves of this form of impurity and live faithful to the religion of him who is devoid of impurity. Hatred, not dirt, is properly called impurity. To hatred is correctly applied the term impurity. Monks should rid themselves of this form of impurity and live faithful to the religion of him who is devoid of hatred. Delusion, not dirt, is properly called impurity. To delusion is correctly applied the term impurity. Monks should rid themselves of this form of impurity and live faithful to the religion of him who is devoid of delusion. At the conclusion of the stanzas, little women attained arahatship together with the supernatural faculties. It appears that in a previous state of existence he was king. Once while making a ceremonial circuit of the city, with sweat pouring down his forehead, he wiped his forehead with a clean cloth, whereupon the cloth became soiled.